Okay, so I actually have some good news. I think this is good news. We have 5 chapters or 5 topics in this unit, and after today, we're going to be done 4 out of 5. You guys all with me here? Make sure you give me your best attention, okay? Thanks. Okay, I would say, in my best opinion, that most of the stuff that you guys need to know this unit, we've actually already done. Like, we've already done 3 out of 5. That's more than halfway there. After today, we'll be done 80%. There's not a whole lot more to learn. And I think that's a good thing, because, like, if you did well on our first quiz, then it means that there's really not much more to add to it. You just need to, like, keep working at what you're doing, right? Whereas if you didn't do well, the good news is that it's not like I'm going to be piling a lot more on top. You get what I'm saying? Like, if you have to, like, go back and relearn and kind of work on a few of the old concepts, I know we have more to do, but there's not a lot more to do, right? That quiz we wrote wasn't quite everything, but it was pretty close. Does that make sense? So that's what I want to start with, is that we're actually most of the way down our unit, especially after today. Today is actually a really logical extension. We've been talking about things like natural selection and how certain species, they have advantages, right? A couple of the questions on your quiz were actually about that concept, right? One of them was, basically the question was, there are 3 species, and one of them can camouflage. None of you guys remember this question, but there's species A, B, and C, and one of them has the ability to camouflage. What would you expect to happen to the species that can camouflage? The answer was I'd expect more of them, because they would survive. Right? And if a species couldn't camouflage, I would expect it to die out. Right? And the names we would give to that would be something like, well, it might go extinct. Right? That's what we're going to talk about today, is what happens to species when they do die. Right? So you guys probably know a few of these definitions, but for the most part, today's notes are all about you need to know the vocabulary, the words for them. And so you guys can read right off the bat here. The first word we're going to talk about is extinction. And extinction is like when a species is entirely gone. We used to have this species on Earth, and there are none of them left. A good example of extinction would be dinosaurs. Right? We have evidence that dinosaurs once roamed the Earth. There's no dinosaurs in my backyard, right? And to the best of our knowledge, there's no dinosaurs anywhere on Earth, which means, can they repopulate the Earth? Well, no, if there's none that are alive right now to begin with. It's not like we can somehow get more of them. I mean, unless you watch Jurassic World and they try to, like, find DNA and make them somehow, but that's science fiction, right? So anyways, we actually have oops, drop my board here. We have some ideas as to why things become extinct. Who's talking to this? Things like earthquakes or volcanoes or asteroids, those are some reasons why things can become extinct. But most extinctions happen over a long period of time, where, like, slowly but surely, shush, whoever's talking. Thank you. Most extinctions, they take a long time, right? There used to be 10,000 species, and then eventually there's 5,000, and then eventually there's 300, and then eventually there's 20, and then eventually there's 4, and then eventually the last one finally dies. And now we no longer have that one rare Asian tiger. I don't know. Does that make sense? So that's called an extinction. You guys know that word, right? But here's some words maybe you don't know. Okay, I'll use my highlighter here. This one is called extirpation. Extirpation. And it's a local extinction. So what it means is that the species used to live somewhere, and it's gone from that location, but we can still find it somewhere else on Earth. Okay? And the example I've got is right in the notes here. It's grizzly bears. Grizzly bears used to be found all over Western Canada. Right? You know, if we went back 300 years ago, there would have been grizzly bears on the coulees over here by Lethbridge. But we don't see grizzly bears in Lethbridge anymore. We see deer, lots of deer, but we don't see grizzly bears anymore. Do we still find grizzly bears somewhere else in the world? Yeah. There's tons of them in the mountain ranges, but they're just not found on, like, the plains anymore. They're not found in the prairies. Does that make sense? So that's called an extirpation. It's known as a local extinction, where it's no longer in this spot. You could even have that with, like, say, I don't know, some sort of bird, I guess, where that bird used to exist in North America. It doesn't exist in North America anymore, but maybe there's a couple in Australia. Okay? It's not extinct, but it's extirpated. Weird word, hey? Now, the next ones kind of go together. There's actually 3 of them, and I didn't bold one of them. I'm sorry, I really should have bolded one. One of them is called threatened. This is the word that should have been bolded. It's called endangered, and then there's special concern. There's like 3 different ones right here. So there's threatened, there's endangered. This should have been bolded, and special concern. Okay. And here's how this works. If I needed to rank them from like most severe to like the least worrying, I mean, they're all worrying, but like extinction is like entirely gone. Dead, 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 never coming back. Extirpation, it's all gone here, but at least somewhere else. Okay. The next one is endangered. Okay. So I know I wrote the word threatened next, but endangered is the next one. And endangered are ones that like they are well on their way to becoming extinct. Okay. Like they are highly likely to become extinct. There's only a few of them left in the world, like like a panda or something like that, where like there's only 20 of them known. Okay, that would be endangered. Threatened then is something that if we don't be careful, it's on its way to becoming endangered. And so like the real key to this one is the word trajectory. Threatened things are declining. That's really the word we need to have, declining. Where their numbers are going down. There could still be 20,000 of them left, but every year we're losing 1,000. Well, if there's 20,000 left and we lose 1,000 every year, we kind of expect that in 20 years they're going to be gone. Right? That'd be a threatened species. Whereas endangered species, they have like really low populations. Really low population. You guys get the difference between the two? So, endangered, there are hardly any left. Threatened are, like, if I were to make a graph, the graph is going down, and that's not good. Okay. And then special concern are kind of like well, we're going to keep an eye on them. Does that make sense? They're vulnerable. Maybe the numbers aren't really low yet. Maybe they're not on a downward trajectory, but circumstances could be bad. Right? Special concern species are usually found in like areas of the world, like for example, say like there's a rainforest that's being clear cut, and like they're logging all the forest out of somewhere in Brazil. Right? A species of special concern would be the one that like inhabits that forest, and if we cut down all the forest, we're going to cause problems. Does that make sense? While I'm talking little kid movies, anybody ever watch the movie Rio? Okay, I would think the birds in Rios are probably of special concern. Okay, right? Because if they cut down all the forests in Rio 2, I don't know, you've seen both the movies, right? Then it'll be very vulnerable, right? Anyways, here's a kind of a chart that would give some examples. So you've got your extirpated species. I mean, really at the top should really be extinct. But the problem about extinct species is there aren't any left of them. So it's kind of hard to give examples. I mean, unless you've heard of species that are extinct, right? Like maybe one you've heard of before. It's called the dodo bird. Ever heard of that one before? Fun name, dodo bird. We don't have any dodo birds anymore. We don't have any more dinosaurs. Right? They're not coming back. Right? Extirpated. Here's a couple of examples. You guys can see this. Like for example, the grizzly bear. Right? At least the prairies. There's no grizzly bears found in like southern, Saskatchewan really anymore, unless they've really wandered far away. So endangered species then, there's very few of them left. Okay, their numbers are very, very small, like the swift fox or the Eskimo curlew. You guys are actually going to do a research project on this, by the way, where I'm going to have you guys search for things that are extinct, extirpated, endangered, threatened, and special concerned, and you're going to do like a research presentation where you look up one in each category and tell me something about it. Right? I'll have you look up its niche and talk about, well, where does it live? Or where did it live, I guess, right? What does it eat? Why is it threatened? So anyways, we're going to do a research project on this next week. Threatened then, these guys are losing their numbers. They're in a downward trajectory. And special concerned, we're keeping an eye on them. Does that make sense, those 5 terms? Okay, cool. Well, we need to talk again about why are these things dying out? Why are we worried about this? And sometimes it's about humans. Okay, sometimes humans are causing problems, and I'm going to get to that in a few slides. But sometimes it's just about variation. Right? We've talked about the word diversity. Right? You guys already know this word variation, right? Variation is like the ability for things to look different. Like example, this deer I found right here. It has some advantages, doesn't it, to look like this? This deer, I bet you, is great at camouflaging because it kind of just blends in a little bit, doesn't it? Right? Now, if it was purely white or purely brown, maybe not so much. But like based on it next to that rock face right there, like, yeah, if you don't look carefully, you might not notice it. If this deer was bright orange, I don't think it's surviving. That's natural selection, though, right? So that's why there's no bright orange deer. Right? So here's a couple of concerns that are also possible. These are natural causes, and these are not human causes yet. We're going to talk about human causes. But here's some other natural causes that could cause things to die out. We've already mentioned some. Catastrophic events. That would be like earthquakes, floods, asteroids hitting the Earth, killing off the dinosaurs kind of thing. That's one possibility. But like here's another one, disease. What if there's some sort of virus, that happens to only hit, a certain sort of animal, right? Like there are some diseases that only hit cows. You guys ever heard of mad cow disease? Right? And so if a disease happens to hit just that, I mean, it doesn't affect humans or birds, right? There's the avian flu, which just hits birds, right? But maybe a disease runs rampant through a particular species and kills it all off. That's possible. Here's another interesting one. Lack of food due to overpopulation. Sometimes there's way too many of a species, and they're fighting for it. Here's the word that we used before. Hopefully you recognize this word. Yeah. Competition, right? And everybody's fighting for the same resources. They all need the same food, right? And it's really challenging to try to feed yourself because there's only like so many prey out there and there's so many of you. We're actually going to do an activity on this tomorrow. Why don't I take a second actually and describe our activity? Hopefully this will be kind of fun. What we're going to do is we're going to put a couple of big tables right in the middle of the room here. Hey, come on in. We're going to put a couple of big tables right in the middle of the room. And I'm going to scatter Cheerios all over the tables. And so I'm going to use some chocolate Cheerios. I'm going to use some of the Fruit Loop Cheerios. We're going to use even some regular Cheerios. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick a color. And that color is going to be what you eat. So we're just going to pick a random color. We'll say like the orange Fruit Loops is what you eat. And I'm going to give you guys I think I'm going to give you like a cup. And I'm going to put a blindfold on you. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to go eat. And you're going to take the cup and you're going to try to like capture as many Cheerios under the cup as you can. Does that make sense? Now, if orange is what you eat, I'm going to set a certain number. I'm going to say you need to eat at least 4 orange Fruit Loops. Otherwise, you die. Does that make sense? However, if you do eat 4 orange Cheerios, you live, and we're going to repopulate, and you're going to now get to have a friend come hunt with you as well. Right? And what we're hopefully going to discover is that it's going to rise and fall and rise and fall, because at first there's going to be lots of prey out there for you to eat. But what happens when everybody's around the table all trying to blindly hunt for orange Cheerios? Is it going to be easy for you to find them when there's like 17 of you crowded around the table? No. You kind of get how this is going to work? So that's actually going to be our activity tomorrow. Hopefully it'll be kind of fun. No, we'll do that tomorrow. Oh, you came in late. So, yeah. So anyways, that's the idea of competition, the idea of inter or intraspecies all fighting for the same thing. So anyways, those are some natural causes. But there's more than just natural causes as to why things become extinct. Okay? Oh, actually, I do have one more natural cause. This one's known as overspecialization. We should highlight this one here. Overspecialization. And what ends up happening in this case is that the species ends up becoming so reliant that its niche becomes very narrow. I'm even going to write that down over here. It becomes...
Excuse the interruption. Could we please have all the grade 12s to the media center for the movie? Again, all the grade 12s to the media center. Thank you.
So what ends up happening is it ends up having a very narrow niche. And what I mean by that is that there's a very specific set of conditions under which it can live. Okay? Humans have a very broad niche. Can we eat plants? Yep. Can we eat animals to survive? Maybe you don't choose not to, but could we eat them? We could even eat bugs if we had to. Right? Where can we live? Can we live in Canada? Can we live in Australia? Well, we can live all over the world, right? Humans have one of the biggest niches out there because there's a lot of conditions we can survive in. Can we survive when it's plus 30 out? I don't want to, but we can. Can we survive when it's minus 40 out? Again, I don't want to, but we can. Okay? Overspecialization means that it's such a narrow set of conditions that like it gets narrowed down. Like let me use temperature as an example. Humans can probably survive as low as minus 30 temperature to as high as plus 30 temperature. I may not want to, but we have the ability to, right? But what if a species was only able to survive at either 22 degrees or 23 degrees Celsius, and that was it? If the temperature raised to 24, it dies. If the temperature drops to 19, it dies. You get how that would be a problem? Because that has such a narrow set of conditions that it would die. And there are some species that have narrowed down their niche. The best example is this one here. It's the great panda. And it only eats bamboo. It's the only thing that over time it's adapted to be able to digest. It doesn't eat leaves, it doesn't eat meat, it only eats the bamboo. Well, here's the problem. What happens if there's no bamboo? Panda dies. Does that make sense? Whereas as humans, if there's no bamboo for me to eat, that's okay. I don't want bamboo anyways, right? But I mean, let's change it to what we've got, right? My daughter, as a 4-year-old, she is incredibly picky. She does not like to eat a whole lot of foods. She's 4, right? It happens, right? But the good news is if she chooses not to eat the macaroni and cheese I make her for supper, I can probably get her to eat hot dogs or a piece of toast with peanut butter, right? And she may not want to eat her salad, but there are other things she can have, right? You get what I'm saying? But like if my daughter literally would only ever eat peanut butter sandwiches, and all of a sudden we ran out of peanut butter in the house, what am I going to do? Does that make sense? So that's called overspecialization. Does that concept make sense? So, okay, now the next slides talk about reasons why animals would become extinct or extirpated, but due to our, like humans, activity. Because we're going to be honest, like we do things as humans that are not good for other species, right? Like we are kind of top of the food chain, right? And so that's what I've got here. Humans have changed the habitats of species throughout history. Here's some examples. We construct buildings, like this school. This school did not used to be here, 10 years ago. You know what used to live out here in these fields? Deer, maybe some groundhogs, lots of birds, right? What happened because we built this school here? Well, they had to move, right? You guys, well, we live on the west side probably, right? Everybody here's on the west side. Probably the best example I can think of this is the deer, right? How often do you guys pass a deer on the way to school or anywhere on the west side, right? Because we built our buildings where they live. Those deer just decided to stick around, right? But through the construction of building, we've destroyed their habitat. Agriculture is another one, right? Agriculture, if you don't know that, really means like we're talking farming. Right? Logging is a really big one. Do you guys know what damming of rivers means? Right, like a beaver dam, it's kind of the same concept. It's like where we block off the water so that like we can build a lake, right? Or maybe we want to use it for like a power plant. I got some pictures here I want to illustrate. This is a logging road. Okay? And you guys can see that like this road right here in this picture, right? Not only are there like all these logs that are stacked up here, right? But now these birds are displaced. And the deer, they can't hide anymore because they needed to hide in the forest, right? Now it affects them, right? Has anybody ever been to Banff? This is Banff, Alberta. Anybody here ever been to Banff? Okay. You guys seen these things over top of the highway? What's it for? Yeah, it's a crossing, right? Because what ends up happening is we put roads right through the middle of their habitat. How is the deer going to cross the street? I mean, it's the joke. How does the chicken cross the road? Well, like literally, how can a chicken cross? It can't. It's going to get run over by a car, right? And so we've actually built these crossings over the top of the highway so that their habitats aren't ruined. Does that make sense? I think I have a slide on it later. That's called habitat fragmentation, where we literally break their habitats into fragments. Okay? I know I don't have pictures of it, but I also talk about it here. Pollutants. We pollute a lot. We use things like pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, right? Those are other ways that we destroy their habitats. You guys probably knew this stuff though, right? Like that's not actually new to you, but I need you to know the terminology. The terminology was called habitat destruction. Okay. Here's another interesting one. This is called the introduction of a non-native species. Okay. And I want to start off with this picture right here. Anybody ever go boating over the summer? We have a kayak, right? If you ever go boating across province lines, sometimes there's like a roadside stopping station where they ask you to pull over because they want to inspect your boat. Yeah, some people are nodding here. You guys have seen that, eh? Why do they want you to see you later? Why do they want you to inspect the boat? Yeah, specifically zebra mussels, but it could be any non-native species. They don't want to have some new random species from Saskatchewan end up in Alberta's lakes and waters. Exactly, yeah. Waterton actually has a huge problem with that, right? And so you might see posters, you might see things there where they're like, clean your boats, because you don't want to accidentally bring back something from another spot and introduce that to a new location. When we do our Cheerios activity tomorrow, I'm actually going to do a simulation for that. Remember how I talked about we were going to have different colored Cheerios, and you're going to hunt specifically for the red ones? Now, you guys know what Fruit Loops are like, right? Right? There's going to be all these different colors, and you're just going to be specifically hunting for one color. Well, what I'm going to do in one simulation is I'm going to then start to flood the table with just generic Cheerios. And little by little, I'm just going to add in more regular Cheerios. You know what that's going to do? It's going to make it harder for you to hunt for the red Cheerios because there's all these like just regular brown Cheerios in there, right? You won't be able to find them as much because like this non-native species is taking over and is like choking it off. Does that make sense? Because what ends up happening is it removes habitat. It consumes all the food supplies. And in general, it just throws the ecosystem out of balance. So some of the best examples of this are, like you guys have heard of the zebra mussels thing, right? But another example would be when European settlers came over to from Europe to North America for the first time. And they brought new species of animals. And those animals, they weren't normally in North America. Does that make sense? And sometimes they bring over like diseases, and those diseases killed off the animals because they were new. So often it's unintentional. Here's another example. Humans have a bad propensity to overhunt, right? Where we used to have so many bison, and they just got hunted over and over and over again, and eventually it threw off the whole ecosystem. You guys know, like, you ever seen a picture like this? This would be like a chain, like a food chain or a food web, right? Where foxes, they eat this thing, but this thing ate plants, and this owl ate this guy, but this snake ate this toad, but this toad ate this insect, and this, right? Like food webs. Well, overhunting really screws up a system because if something gets overhunted and all of a sudden there's none of these, well, if this guy dies, it could cause this guy to die, which could cause that guy to die, right? The example I have written in here is a species of deer that eats grass. But let's say that the deer population plummets. Let's say that we hunt all of the deer way too much. Well, you know what the deer did? The deer ate the grass. What's going to happen to the grass if there's no deer left there for them to eat it? Well, it's no longer controlled, so the deer doesn't eat the grass grows way too much. Well, now that grass smothers these snakes. The snakes can't get out of the grass anymore. Now the snakes die off. But this hawk, it was eating snakes. You get what I'm saying there? Right? So one thing can really cascade, which is why I have this picture right here. One domino can really cause a whole chain of them to all fall over. And it can even just be the smallest little thing. So, with all that being said, now that we've talked about the fact that, like, yeah, animals, we sometimes accidentally kill off a species, or at least put them in danger, right? We got to talk about ways in which we try to fix this problem, right? And there's two main terms I need you to know, okay? One is called an in situ conservation. In situ conservation. And the word is going to make sense because it literally is the word in. The word in means, like, literally it is inside. And the best example of this would be like Banff National Park. Okay? We have national and provincial parks, and you're not supposed to be able to go hunting in them, right? And you're not supposed to be able to build a whole lot in there, right? Like, I know there is the town of Banff, right? But, like, for the most part, the park is like a protected area, okay? We call that in situ conservation because the animals are living in their natural habitat, and we are basically roping it off around them, saying this is a safe zone for you guys to live. Does that make sense? So that's called in situ conservation. Okay. Now, you guys have my notes in front of you, so you're going to know the answer to the next one already. But the opposite of in situ conservation would be ex situ conservation, which means that it's like outside of its natural habitat. Oh, I heard the word. Who said that? Like a zoo. Yeah, that's the word we would use. A zoo would be a great example of an ex situ conservation, right? Do the pandas at the Calgary Zoo normally live there? Well, no, they live somewhere else, right? But like we've taken those pandas out of their natural habitat, put them somewhere new, which is not always ideal. Sometimes we have to do it. Sometimes we do it by choice, right? Like a captive breeding program would be a good example. A species is dying in the wilderness. It is being killed off because there's no habitat for it, or its predators are killing it, or whatever, right? And we take those species and we go put them in a special place, a zoo, right? And we try to feed them and we try to restore them to life. And over generations, we try to breed them together so that we make new generations of giant pandas, right? But is that easy to do? No. It costs a lot of money and time, right? And usually it means you need to have volunteers or charities or not-for-profit organizations try to find a way to do that. But we think it's worth it, right? Save the peregrine falcon organization, right? Where we wanted to keep it from dying off, right? Does that make sense? So I need you guys to know these two terms then. In situ conservation would be like a national park. Ex situ conservation would be like a zoo. Okay? Both are trying to prevent extinctions, though. So, guys, we're almost done this unit. Okay. Now, what I talked about today, I got to be honest, was it like brand new information to you? Like you probably knew a lot of this stuff, right? I might add a little bit more. Probably the biggest thing I needed you guys to know then was the words that we use to describe it. Okay, so let me remind you about some of the terminology we used. Things like over-specialization, in situ and ex situ conservation, right? A lot of those terminologies we used. Extirpated versus extinct versus endangered. Okay, one of the suggestions I might even give you when you guys go to study is write down all these definitions on a sheet of paper, right? That's a good idea, right? So, okay, that's all I've got for today. We've got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to stop my video recording and then give you guys some final instructions.